Next we have, and I think I saw his face. We have SB 1384, Senator Surovell. You can tell us about your bill and why we need it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was in the middle of amending Delegate Scott's bill in committee that Senator Obenshain just came back into. Give me 1 second. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Madam Chairman, Senate Bill 1384 has to do with procurement and arbitration. As the committee may or may not know, arbitration is sort of a growing reality in the world, and a lot of employers and business are using arbitration to hide civil rights complaints, wage theft complaints, gender discrimination complaints, and consumer disputes that would otherwise be in court and be subject to transparency and public scrutiny. What this bill does is it basically creates an ability of a local government to obtain information about a company's procurement history before engaging in a contracting with the company. It allows the bidder, it allows the local government to get information about a company's arbitration practices, and thus the way they treat their employees and the way they treat their customers in advance of making a procurement decision, award. The bill is based on, it evolves out of, in 2014, the Obama administration promulgated regulations that required prospective federal contractors to report employment and labor law violations in the bid and award process, and also disclose, including disputes that were done in forced arbitration. There's also, by the way, federal legislation pending, which is co-sponsored by every Democratic member of the Virginia congressional delegation, and also Congressman Morgan Griffith supports a version of this bill, of the federal bill, that only applies to employment discrimination. It's called the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Harassment Act of 2019. And so what the bill basically does, it's been substantially narrowed. You all might remember this bill because it came through your committee last year, and this bill is now a shadow of its former self. But it basically says that in any procurement involving either employment dispute, in any procurement over a certain threshold, a local government can require a company to report information regarding arbitrations revolving around either employment disputes or a very small number of consumer disputes. It excludes any forced arbitration provisions relating to senior executives or anything covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And basically it says that the local government can require a bidder to provide copies of the boilerplate arbitration provision they use, the number of times they've compelled arbitration in the last 5 years, the number of employees or consumers who have opted out of arbitration if that's allowed, and the number of times a claimant has prevailed. So in other words, the number of times an employee has successfully established an arbitration that they've been sexually harassed, discriminated against on the basis of their race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And then those factors can be considered in procurement. This bill is a local option bill. Nobody has to do anything if this bill passes. It simply gives local governments a tool in the procurement process. There's a large coalition of people supporting it who I believe are on the line to speak. And I believe that one other important factor to note is many major corporations have stopped using forced arbitration because they know what's coming on the federal side, including Google, Microsoft, Wells Fargo, and some others. So, Madam Chairman, that's basically what the bill does. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? All right, Madam Clerk, we have folks to speak for and against this bill.
Yes, Madam Chair, we will first hear Julie Strandley from the Impact Project. If you could enter the room and unmute your microphone so that you can speak in favor.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Carr, subcommittee members. Thank you very much for your public service. I am here this morning to endorse SB 1384, the Local Procurement Transparency Act. We join a group of organizations forming the Virginia Fair Arbitration Coalition that supports the bill. Our coalition includes the following Virginia organizations and national organizations with Virginia members: the Virginia Poverty Law Center, the Reserve Officers Association, Virginia Employment Lawyers Association, the National Women's Law Center, Legal Aid Justice Center, the National Association of Consumer Advocates, the National Employment Law Project, and the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States. Several coalition members may not have been able to testify this morning, but they have submitted comments online, so I refer you to those. In addition to the coalition, the Fairfax County School Board has—
Time of the witness has expired.
Thank you. Thank you for stepping forward, Ms. Strandy. Madam Clerk, who else do we have?
Yes, we will now hear testimony against SB 1384. First, Matthew Bruni from the Virginia Bakers Association. You get into the room and unmute your microphone.
Good morning, Madam.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Matt Bruni with the Virginia Bankers Association. While we do appreciate the changes Senator Surovell has incorporated into the bill, we remain opposed due to the onerous and unnecessary requirements placed on businesses in the local government procurement process. Arbitration clauses are legal provisions to resolve disputes as they avoid costly litigation for both parties. Due to federal preemption, states cannot ban the use of arbitration clauses, so this bill is really a creative end run to attempt to use local procurement to discourage and reduce their use. The information this bill seeks to require during the local government process is not something businesses are currently required to collect or report for any other purpose. For business operating in other states, that information is not just limited to the uses in Virginia, but across the entire company for the past 5 years. It's required for every procurement. So we, again, oppose the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Madam Chair, the last testimony we have against registered against the legislation is Matthew Benka. You can enter the room and unmute your microphone.
Mr. Benka.
Madam Chairman, Matt Benka with the Virginia Contractor Procurement Alliance. We are opposed to the bill. I think particularly the penalty section of this bill is pretty stringent. So that's just the one thing I'd like to bring your attention to.
Thank you, Mr. Benka. Madam Clerk, anyone else to speak for or against, or just to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one participant here registered as no position, Jeff Palmore. You could enter the room and unmute your microphone.
Madam Chair, I don't have anything to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, questions for the Senator from any of our committee members? Senator, you have the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the bill is pretty straightforward. Again, it's a local option bill. It was actually requested in part. The Fairfax County School Board has indicated that if they were to have this authority, that they would be interested in using it. They've had some issues with one of their a local school lunch money vendor who uses a consumer arbitration provision in their contract, which basically requires any family who has problems with the administration of their lunch money to do this arbitration instead of going to court. And the school board that has no sense of the kind of problems that this vendor has had in other jurisdictions because they use forced arbitration everywhere. But again, there's a large national coalition of groups that are opposing these kinds of arbitration provisions, particularly in employment contracts, because they prohibit, they basically hide things like sexual harassment, wage discrimination on the basis of race or gender, racial discrimination, et cetera, from public view. And what this bill does is it levels the playing field between companies that don't use forced arbitration and they have all their problems vetted in a courtroom in public where it can be seen, and companies that try and hide it using arbitration. So I think it's a bill that sort of levels the playing field for contractors and provides, our governments with the information they need to make a procurement decision. And I would hope the body would would report the bill.
All right, thank you, Senator. All right, the committee moves by motion.
Madam Chair.
Delegate Simon.
So speaking to the bill briefly, and then I think I'll move to report, but the issue that Senator Surovell and Ms. Stranley have brought forward is a real one. And I appreciate the testimony of the Bankers Association, where they suggest that this sort of thing does things for both sides. But when you put $200 of your kid's lunch money into an account and then it disappears and you can't get it back, it's really not an equal playing field for you to have to go up against this huge multinational corporation who does these forced arbitrations all day, every day, because that's how they resolve all their disputes, versus being able to go to small claims court, right, and drag them in, and then all of a sudden it becomes more worth it to them to give you your $200 back than to fight you over it. And so I think that local governments ought to have a right to know if they're going to force families to use these kind of companies, what their history is with forced arbitration. I agree with the bankers; it is a creative end run. And I actually would sort of compliment the Senator and Ms. Stranley on their creativity in this one. And so with that, I'd move to report.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been moved and properly second. The clerk will please open the roll.
Madam Chair, yes. Delegate Lethwich. Delegate Lethwich. That concludes all of the names that have not voted.
Clerk will please close the roll. The bill reports to the full committee 5-2, SB 1384. Thank you, Senator Surovell.
Thank you, Madam Chair.